Hey, hi, hello, ladies. How's it going? How's it going? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan Frampton. I'd like you to hit subscribe and the like button before we move on with today's video because I like support, okay? Support's just a very nice thing to have around here. It's free for you and it means a lot to me, okay? So if you could just go ahead and hit those couple buttons real quick and we'll start talking about the topic du jour today, which is all about Kurt Cobain, because Kurt Cobain has been in the news yet again. I know it's the year 2026 and not 1994, but don't adjust your monitors here. Kurt Cobain really is in the news, and there's a couple people in my audience that would like me to talk about it. Now, over the last, 2 weeks or so, 3 or 4 different reports have come out about Kurt Cobain, and today we're just going to get into all of it. Why not? So the first thing we want to talk about is this forensic study that just came out from this group of forensic scientists or whatever. And this isn't a group of crack conspiracy theorists over there on 4chan or whatever. These are real, legitimate forensic scientists. And they put out a report that was peer-reviewed by other forensic scientists. And what they've determined was 5 very specific pieces of information, 5 pieces of evidence that lead them to believe that Kurt Cobain was murdered and that he didn't commit. Now, a lot of the things that they found in this report are things that conspiracy theorists and other type theorists have been saying since the 90s, okay? There's going to be really nothing new here in this video other than confirmation from forensic scientists that all the things that us crazy people have been saying since the death of Kurt Cobain, there's actually merit to some of it. So let's talk about Kurt Cobain, okay? In 1994, this guy died. And he wasn't just some guy. He was the biggest rock and roller of the time, the biggest musician, the most influential guy that you could possibly imagine in the rock and roll world. Everybody's eyes were on Kurt Cobain. I don't think I have to tell you any more about Kurt Cobain. But the weeks before his death were very mysterious, okay? This guy, Kurt Cobain, he actually went missing for a couple weeks, leading his wife, Courtney Love, to hire a personal investigator to investigate where the hell Kurt Cobain is. This investigator's name was Tom Grant, and he's a very important guy in this whole conspiracy thing, in this whole theory thing. But in the weeks coming up to his death, Duff McKagan, the bass player from Guns N' Roses, found himself on a plane with Kurt Cobain and noted that Kurt Cobain was saying some pretty troubling things. Now, Kurt Cobain was a pretty depressed guy. Kurt Cobain was addicted to drugs. But nobody thought that Kurt Cobain was going to end it all. That really wasn't on the radar, really. But he was acting very strangely a couple weeks before his passing, of course. And then they found Kurt Cobain, dead. He was in a green room above his garage, apparently, and he was discovered by an electrician. Now, I don't know how or why an electrician was called to the house when there was a dead body there or what. And Kurt Cobain's body was in that greenhouse for days before anybody saw it. So even that raises a bunch of questions. Even that is a little bit suspect. So we got an electrician coming to Kurt Cobain's house weeks into him being gone and days after him being killed. I have no idea what's going on there, but that's just me recklessly speculating all these years later. The moment after the news hit and everybody was made aware that we lost Kurt Cobain, well, the physical evidence really didn't add up. There were way more questions than there were answers. Nobody was satiated by this whole explanation. It didn't seem right. And then by the end of the 90s, there were documentaries being made, there were little films being made, and nobody really that I've ever spoken to thinks that Kurt Cobain actually. Everybody that I know believes that he was murdered. Some people believe it was the members of Nirvana that killed him. Some people believe it was Courtney Love that killed him. But nobody really believes that Kurt Cobain was the one to do it himself. And this forensic study that came out really highlights all those sort of things, and they came out with 5 really amazing pieces of physical evidence that are strong enough that I would say open up this case and actually investigate this thing. Because the reason why this wasn't investigated was because there was a police spokesperson the day that they found Kurt Cobain's body. He just came out to the driveway and said, "Oh, it looks like a in there, nothing to see here, move on," and that just became the story. I have no idea why they're covering it up. I have no idea why there's no investigation happening, but it wasn't. Case closed, everybody move on, nothing to see here. Apparently, in 2014, the Seattle Police Department reopened the case, but they were like, no, don't worry, still nothing here, nothing's changed, move on with your life, everybody. But nobody was really like, that's a good enough answer for me. And I know I'm cutting out a lot of stuff. There's not really gonna be the whole story here. This is just a quick little YouTube video about the 3 little news stories that are happening right now. This is definitely not a deep dive into the whole situation that went on with Kurt Cobain. Not by a long shot, and I understand that. But now it's time to actually talk about that peer-reviewed forensic report. Because this wasn't just one crackpot, just one conspiracy theorist. This is like 5 highly respected forensic scientists that put out this forensic report. And I don't recommend necessarily reading it. It's very gruesome. There's a lot of photographs in it that are hard to look at, but I'll do my best to leave a link for it in the description. If it's not there, that just means I forgot. Sorry about that, but it's just a Google search away, promise. So the 5 pieces of evidence are as follows. Let's break it down. First, let's talk about the toxicology reports. Now, the toxicology reports indicate that there was so much heroin in this man's body that it was almost impossible for people to believe that he could operate a gun, let alone a shotgun. Because let me remind you people, this wasn't a handgun wound. This wasn't from a pistol. This is from a shotgun. Apparently like a big ass motherfucking thing, bro. And not only was it big, the guy was so fucked up on something that would have incapacitated him well beyond enough to be able to use this firearm. So I think that's enough of a reason to reopen this case. Also, off the toxicology thing, they indicate that Kurt died from a lack of breathing, not from being shot in the head, meaning he was killed before he was shot in the head. But a dead person, I'm not sure if you're aware, but they also can't operate a firearm. So those 2 pieces of evidence right there are enough to reopen this case and start investigating, start asking questions. Nobody is saying, go out there and arrest people right away. Nobody is saying, oh, Courtney Love, lock her up. No. Ask a couple goddamn questions. Get a trial on the go. Another thing that people talked about as it pertains to this case and why they don't believe it, and that was backed up in this report, was the lack of blood. People are like, this should be a really, really bloody scene, and there should especially be blood on his hand. You'd expect a big blood splatter to come from that shotgun wound and land on his hand. But his hand was suspiciously clean. So that evidence is enough to reopen this case and be like, why was his hand so clean? Not only was his hand clean, apparently there was a heroin kit there that was neatly organized. Now, somebody that is this fucked up, somebody that is this distraught mentally and physically, they're not going to organize their heroin kit. They're not going to put the caps on the needles and make sure everything is fucking neat and tidy. Well, at least I don't think so. That would be enough of a reason to ask some more questions, to investigate that aspect of it. Why are we okay with this? Why is this just like, all right, no, yeah, nothing to see here? I don't understand, people. I really don't. The circumstantial evidence, the physical evidence, all the photographs that I've seen, it all indicates enough to get a couple detectives on the scene and figure this fucking shit out. Not only does it seem messed up and botched, it seems intentionally so. It seems covered up. And then if this case is reopened, we have to ask the police department themselves, why was this case closed for so long? Why didn't you investigate this? This has been 30 years and the family has no fucking answers. What have you done? Nothing is the answer. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, you know, in this report, this forensic science report put out by these forensic scientists, they talk about the note. Now, the note has always been a thing that theorists talk about when it comes to this case, because it starts off being written like a note from a guy leaving the music business, or at least leaving his band, you know? A guy who's fed up with his position in the rock and roll world. And then by the end of the note, the handwriting changes. It gets really, really childlike and big and bold and off kilter and written on an angle and stuff. And somebody with a lot of heroin would start to write that note, and by the time it kicks in, you know, they'd start to veer off a little bit. But it's the tone in which the note changes along with the handwriting that makes people really believe that someone else finished this note for him. This just leaves a lot more questions. Was Kurt Cobain just up there in the green room writing this note when he was discovered by whoever did the deed, pumped him full of a heavy narcotic, and then shot him in the head? Is that what happened here? Did they see Kurt Cobain in a sad, desperate situation and take advantage of it? I have no fucking idea. But the final and most crucial piece of information, the biggest kind of smoking gun in this evidence, and it's always been the thing, it's always been talked about, was that the scene seems staged. It doesn't seem like a room in which a guy actually took his own life. It seems like a room in which somebody set it up for like a museum or whatever. Kurt Cobain just laying there, his head tilted, not enough blood splatter, the heroin kit looking nice, neat, and tidy. Lot of questions over here, and a lot of the clues point to the scene being staged. Now that is horrific. That is absolutely deplorable behavior. And I don't need to tell you that, but can you imagine that these guys out there that would have gotten away with this, that would have gotten away with pumping this guy full of heroin, shooting him in the head, and staging this scene, have been getting away with this for so long? Wouldn't that be insane if that came out? That we're like, okay, yeah, we are going to open up this investigation. We are going to ask the questions. We are going to get to the bottom of it. And then they actually found out that that was the bottom of it. Holy shit, that's a level of evil. That is so fucking crazy. But I can't say for sure that that's what happened. Of course I can't. Nobody can. But all the evidence certainly fucking leads to that, doesn't it? And I know I'm not a policeman. I'm not a detective. I'm not an investigator of any kind. I'm just a human being with a set of eyeballs and a penchant for storytelling, you know? And when I'm paying attention to this story, it doesn't seem to be telling the right story. It seems so messed up, dude. The blood splatter, the length of the gun, the amount of drugs in this guy's system, the staged nature of the scene, it just all looks so bad. It all looks so premeditated. If you were to see this in a film, if this played out in fiction, and now I know sometimes life is stranger than fiction, you would know where these clues would point. And you would hope that the people that did this heinous shit would have to pay for it. And there would be some level of accountability or whatever. But nah, no accountability. Not in today's day and age, especially not in today's day and age. God damn. But those are the 5 big claims that came from this forensic report. But that wasn't even where it all ended. But people have kept talking about this over the last couple weeks. So much, in fact, that an ex-cop of the Seattle Police Department, somebody that was there at the time, his name is Neil Lowe, and he served in the Violent Crimes Division, and his service, when added up, was over 50 years. Again, this guy is not a crackpot. This guy's not just some guy on 4chan typing out conspiracy theorists. This is a cop of over 50 years in Seattle, and he agrees with everything that was just in that forensic report. And he wants the investigation to be reopened because of how badly it was botched. In 2005, he was asked to conduct an internal audit of the Kurt Cobain case, and he got to touch all the photographs, he got to touch the gun, and he was like, yo, we really have to investigate this. My audit concludes that we need to do something about this, and nothing was done about it. I don't know why, just seems a little bit fucked up if you ask me. And now that all these years have moved on, why would the people investigating this investigate themselves to be like, we're the ones that really fucked this up and we're kind of at fault here? That's kind of like asking the FBI to investigate the FBI or the DOJ to investigate the DOJ. There's a lot of threads that don't seem to be tying up correctly here. Man, oh man. But why is this police officer coming out right now? It's all very suspect. If he knew all this for so long, why is he just saying it now? Well, he has a book coming out, and apparently he wants to sell it. So take with that what you will, you know? And if he was sitting on all this information for so long, of course he'd want to talk about it, but what's one way to talk about it? In a book, in an organized fashion. So I'm not here to discredit the cop or the ex-cop or whatever because he's coming out with a book and maybe using this as a marketing opportunity. That just seems like a smart way to capitalize on this conversation because now people are talking about it again. It's all bubbled up again. There's an investigation happening now. Now's the time to sell the book. Now's the time to get out there with this information. And hopefully this will rile up a couple people, get this conversation really going so the Seattle Police Department actually reopen the case. And depending on what he puts in that book, depending on what he finds and how compelling it is for everybody, well then maybe we can move forward again with that. But I really don't think that that's going to happen. I think that Seattle Police Department's going to be like, nah, cool book, buddy. But at the top of this video, I said that there were 3 updates, and that was the first 2 of them. The third one now that everybody is talking about this is actually a member of Kurt Cobain's family. Kurt Cobain's uncle, Gary Cobain, he came out to express all these same sorts of things as well. His family believes that Kurt Cobain was murdered, and he points to the gun and the blood splatter, the length of the gun and all that sort of stuff as well. And he also believes that the note that Kurt wrote was a farewell to Nirvana, not necessarily a farewell to life. And maybe Kurt Cobain was gonna go out there and start a solo project. Who knows what was rumbling around in that man's mind? You know, he would have had some conversations with some people the weeks leading up to this, even though he was missing. There are weeks before any of that, you know? what is going on in this guy's mind. I'm sure some of those people that were really close to him had sort of an idea of what was going on in his mind. And they either didn't want to lose their cash cow or they wanted to figure out a way to make a cash cow last longer. I have no fucking idea what the motive behind any of this was. But Kurt and Courtney famously had a very toxic relationship leading up to him going missing, leading up to him taking his own life, in quotes. There were domestic disputes and the cops were called. Courtney said that Kurt was hiding in a room with a gun, but Kurt said, no, I'm hiding from Courtney. So it's really, really hard to know what to believe, but we have context clues to go on, and I have, 40 years of knowing who Courtney Love is. You know what I'm saying? I was around for Kurt Cobain, even though I was very young when I learned that he died, and just based on the types of people that these are, is another context clue to open up this investigation and to ask a couple fucking questions. All right, so that is going to be my Kurt Cobain video for this week. I tried to make this video a little bit earlier on in the week, but I had such a hard time. I don't know why I was having such a hard time with it. I guess like the nature of it, the violent nature of it, the how many conspiracies there are about it. It's just a hard topic to kind of talk about. I might have to go in and censor a couple words just to make sure it's like comfortable enough to go up on YouTube. But with all that being said, of course, I'm gonna throw it to you guys. What do you think about Kurt Cobain? What do you think about Nirvana? Are they a rock and roll band that you enjoy, that you don't enjoy? Do you respect them? Do you not respect them? Do you think that the toxicology report has merit to it? Do you believe the forensic scientists? Or are you on Courtney Love's side? I've never met somebody in my 40 years on this earth that have ever been on Courtney Love's side or the Seattle Police Department's side. So I would love to hear an argument in favor of that. I would love to hear an argument in favor of the official reporting. But out of all the time I've spent on this earth, I have not heard any compelling evidence or any compelling story ever that indicates that Kurt Cobain actually. But I'm just an idiot on the internet playing Marvel Rivals and talking about rock and roll as a 40-year-old man. What the fuck do I know? I need real investigators, real detectives, real forensic people to get out there on this scene and figure it out officially. Let's change the narrative to something more truthful, why not? Why are we always hiding the truth when it comes to everything? God damn, it's always up to the journalists to go out after the investigators to be like, there's more investigating to be done, actually. No questions are actually being answered because I have a shit ton of questions and nobody's answering them. And the answers that I'm getting make no fucking sense. But here we are, fucking 30 years later. The narrative has not changed, even though the conversation has not dwindled. This video was very difficult to make. It took me days and days and days to make it. There was a couple days there where I did take after take after take, and I could not get this video out. So I'm happy to finally have it out there. I was going to ignore it, but there were a couple people in the audience that demanded that I talk about this. So that's me talking about it. That's where I stand on the whole situation. Where do you stand on the whole situation? All right. Really appreciate you. Goodbye. See you later and have a good one.